So what if I told you there was a plant that probably grows in your backyard that you could harvest to make a very healthy, I'm going to call it flour substitute. Today, we're going to share with you what that plant is, and we've been using it for the last 6 years since we discovered it, and it's basically become a staple, even though we don't have to do any work as far as growing and propagating it. Well, today we're talking about that plant, and that plant is curled, or otherwise yellow dock. Over much of North America, curled dock is considered to many people to be a weed. This plant was introduced to North America basically for its edible and somewhat medicinal qualities. And you can find curled dock virtually everywhere. You probably have seen this plant and you didn't even know it. Curled dock or yellow dock is a member of the buckwheat family, and buckwheat is far more well known for its nutritional qualities because it's been sort of grown as a traditional crop for a lot longer. But curled dock is sort of the wild equivalent of this. This plant grows in a multitude of different environments. It's very terrestrial, although it does have several relatives across North America, some native, some introduced, which do live in other environments such as great water dock, which lives in wetland environments. This relatively unassuming plant doesn't have showy flowers, doesn't have unique leaves, and is really easy to overlook until it goes to seed. That's when you will probably notice this plant because it has large stalks of seed that can be over my head, so can be over 6 feet high. As you can see here, when the plant is fairly young, the leaves are fairly small, but they're quite distinctive. These long, I guess you'd say oblong leaves that kind of come from a rosette. When the plant is small like this, it can actually be consumed, although the leaves are known to have a fair bit of oxalic acid, so you don't want to necessarily consume large quantities of it, similar to spinach, but it is edible. So as we get into late summer, into August, where we are, this is the time when you're going to see these large stalks of seed pods, and if you're paying attention, you'll probably see it around almost any roadside you would possibly traverse. This is a really cosmopolitan plant. It's really traveled with Europeans and spread across the whole continent. You can see in our pasture here by the barn, we have quite a few seed heads, and this just kind of goes to that testament of this is a fairly weedy plant. Our sheep do consume the leaves, but they don't touch the seeds very much. But what's interesting about it is this is a biannual plant. So those younger rosettes that we showed you just a second ago are important because to get the seed stock, you need to have that young rosette survive. And that's the wonderful thing about this being kind of a weedy plant, is you don't have to do a lot of care. You just have to leave it alone. Curled dock's also a relatively decent companion for other vegetables. You can let a few of them go to seed in amongst some of your more robust plants, and you'll kind of get a double crop without too much negatives. So I'm really hyping this up as an easy plant and making it sound amazing, but what do you do with it? Well, there are a lot of different parts of the plant that are edible. Like I mentioned, you can eat the young greens in the spring or early part of the summer. We have done that, but we don't do it very often because what we really want is the seeds. You won't find a lot of information online on the nutritional value of the seeds, but as a member of the buckwheat family, there's a lot of similarities. The two biggest benefits to this are the seeds are very high in fiber, and we'll go into that in a moment, but they're also relatively high in protein, which is kind of a nice thing for a relatively low maintenance plant. And as an added bonus, the seeds are gluten-free, which is high in fiber, gluten-free, kind of a win-win situation all around there. The root is also edible, but obviously to get the root you have to kill the plant, and that somewhat defeats the purpose of trying to get the seed. My suggestion would be either find a large population you can harvest some roots from that maybe is not a contaminated site, because this plant will grow everywhere, or get a big enough patch of it going yourself that you can kind of allow that little bit of experimenting. So one thing we've really learned over the years when you're doing things on a homestead scale and you're not doing it in sort of a conventional way, grains are difficult. For us in particular, grains are also a bit problematic because a lot of them have gluten or contribute to diabetic issues. Just like buckwheat and rhubarb, the seeds on this are interesting because they have little papery wings. And that's the part that basically gives you the fiber. Each one of those seeds is surrounded by that little paper wing. And for us, we just harvest the whole thing. While these seeds still have carbohydrates, they're so high in fiber because of the little winged seed that they have. And for us, we just process them that way. You will read a lot of people say if you're trying to get rid of that extra chaff, this is a really problematic plant to deal with. So harvesting by hand is exceptionally simple. The one thing you're going to want to do is make sure that the plants essentially are ready to be harvested. And really what that means is you want them to be fairly dry. We've had an amazing summer for this because we're in the middle of basically a mini drought, and these seeds have had no rain on them whatsoever. So they're very clean and they're very dry and they're very ready. You just grab some of these seeds that kind of are in little whorls on the stalks and pull. And it's as simple as that. So it's pull, repeat, pull, repeat. You can use some discretion if you have an area that maybe has some extra fluff or whatever you on it, you can avoid it. But we are just going to go ahead and collect essentially 2 bowls worth here, and we'll bring you back to show you what we do kind of to keep it simple to process this. So as we harvest, there's a couple little tidbits that come to mind because we have been collecting and using this for a few years now. Really enjoy it, to be honest. But one thing to consider is if you have some really big plants or you're expecting some wet weather, for example, it's sometimes nice to stake these up because they do get quite top heavy, and that kind of bleeds into the next point of one thing we find when we're harvesting off the plant is typically the seeds at the top are a little bit cleaner most of the time. When the plant gets bunched up at the bottom, you tend to get more insects and things into it. So I'm going to say this is such a prolific plant. If you have any number of them, you don't necessarily have to feel bad about missing some, because that's only going to translate into being more plants the following years as some of those seeds get the chance to spread and germinate for you. So we do tend to watch as we're picking off the plant and just avoid areas that have got a lot of cobwebs or whatnot on them. So the last point about this plant is you're going to get some other stuff in your harvested seeds. And on a wet year, we tend to find a lot of little beetles and things. This year's actually been pretty good. There's not a lot, aside from a couple of spiders that have come out of this. So we might not have to sit this off to the side, but this is a nice plant for you can harvest it at the optimal time. Put it somewhere like a greenhouse or somewhere that it can sit that's dry, and you can deal with it later on. On that note, we're starting to lose light out here at the moment, but we're going to finish up this harvest, fill these 2 bowls. I mean, I've already half filled it in virtually no time. Put them into the greenhouse for later processing, but we're going to take you inside and sort of show you what we do with this as far as making it into a usable product. So we are now actually a couple months later. We said we were going to go in and do it right away. We didn't, because we actually still had some ground. And that's the one thing I will say about this. Like a lot of other things that you grind at home, don't grind too much, because although it does have a shelf life, it will keep a lot better as the actual seed than it will as the powder. So what we're actually doing now is, this is our harvest from 2025, but we're going to box that up or package that up or store it for later. And we're going to just do this little container here that we've got left, which is all harvested last year, and get that all ground up. So to do that, the thing we found actually works the best, because these are such a small papery little seed with their little wing bits, is the coffee grinder. We do have a hand crank grinder that works pretty good for some of the other grains like sorghum or millet, but this stuff is so light it doesn't tend to go down into the actual grinding piece. So definitely, if you're going to harvest this plant and do these seeds, get yourself a coffee grinder because it works really well. So actually, on that note, I think every homesteader probably should invest in a coffee grinder or two, because there's a lot of other things that we use this little machine for. So once we get this all sorted out, we're actually going to use some of this curled dark flour to make some Dutch baby pancakes for dinner, because we really like the taste of them with this stuff in it. And one thing we do with this, we do sift it, because we try to get as much of the chaff really broken up as we possibly can. So going through a second time does help with some of those larger pieces. And it tends to give it more of a nice, finer flour, although there's still some little chunks in there, which is just fine.
When I make baby Dutch pancakes, 4 eggs, 6 for us because it's Silkies, 1 cup of flour, 1 cup of milk, a little smidgen of salt, and a teaspoon of cinnamon. But because we're going with our curl dog flour, instead of doing half almond flour, half whole wheat flour, we're doing a third of each. So we're using 1/3 of our curl dog. Put her in there. It's going to be fantastic. All right, there you have it, fresh out of the oven. We're going to let that cool off a little bit. As you can see, though, we treated ourselves to some frozen raspberries crumbled on top of there and some wonderful dark chocolate chips. It's going to be marvelous.
So I just finished grinding everything up, and we've got a packed 1 liter mason jar full of our sort of flour from this curl dog. And just to put it in perspective, we had a little bit less than this 3 liter jar full. I've already moved some over. But look at this. We barely made a dent in what we harvested this year. So even though this doesn't look like a lot of flour substitute, this plant is very productive. Like, you will get a lot back from it to mix in to your other recipes. So hopefully this gives you some ideas, and hopefully you give curl dog a try. Like I say, it's something you can probably find close to you. In addition to things like the Dutch baby pancakes, really any kind of thing that you use flour in, one thing we really like it in is pizza crust. But on that note, I am going to go and enjoy these Dutch baby pancakes for dinner.